welcome all to this edition of Shop Talk. In this episode, we're going to be talking about undercarriage visual inspection. My name is Richard Fortin. I'm with the Carter University team, and let's go ahead and get started. So the benefits that we're going to, after what we go through today, hopefully you'll realize these three benefits. So, of course, good visual inspection can predetermine failures. You know, if something isn't looking right in undercarriage visual inspection, there's a chance that it's something that you're going to catch before it fails, and that's always a good thing. Finding failures at early hours can lower the repair expense. That's been proven numerous times. And then the last one there, incremental improvement in undercarriage life can lead to large savings in repair costs. So if we can somehow increase your undercarriage life by 25 hours or 100 hours or more than that, all of those things lead to large savings, not only in repair costs, but in the life of the machine. So any way you can improve that undercarriage life is a good thing for you, the customer. Would like to make one qualifying statement regarding this particular Shop Talk. This one is focused on track type tractors. Of course, some of the principles can be discussed can be applied to excavators and rubber track machines, but that's not what we're focused on. Questions about your specific application and machine should always be discussed with your local service management team or your product support representative or your salesman, whoever you work with at Carter Machinery. If you have questions, ask them. So for our agenda, we're going to really cover two different things. There's three categories of things that can affect undercarriage life. Those three categories are man, material, and machine. We'll get into those in more detail in a minute. But before we do, we're going to discuss things under the man category, and that will be maintenance or visual inspection, which is considered a maintenance item. So the three categories that affect undercarriage life are man, material, machine. And by man, we mean human. So maintenance, operating techniques, how we operate the machine, and then changes in application. In the material side, again, we're not going to discuss the material side of things just because of time constraints, but undercarriage manufacturing, how that undercarriage is built, you know, the hardness levels of the materials that are used within the undercarriage. The material that the undercarriage engages, so the types of soils that you operate in with an undercarriage. You know, if you're using an undercarriage in wood chips, that certainly has a different life than if you're using an undercarriage in a clay type soil. So all of those things are pretty important, but we just don't have time to cover them today. The last one there, machine, that is how the machine is set up, you know, the speed of the machine, the loading of the machine, the configuration of that machine, even the balance of the machine, front to back, side to side balance can affect the undercarriage life on that machine. So we're not going to discuss machine, we're not going to discuss material, and we're going to focus on what we can do through visual inspection to affect undercarriage life. So the first thing is track tension. You know, track tension is one of those things that's not too loose is not good and too tight is not good. You want the exact specification that it's designed, that the machine is designed for. So a couple of things to note here. When we have a track too tight, up here in the upper right-hand corner where you see my my pointer, the red line is track tension in pounds. So if we have a track sag, say we're down here at 2.5 inches of track sag, the tension on the track, what's pulling the track apart, or what's trying to pull the track apart, the chain and all of the undercarriage It puts, 500 or 1,000 pounds of tension on the track. But if we shorten that sag up to, say, 3/4 of an inch, then we can have upwards of 4,000 pounds of tension on the track trying to pull that track apart. So you can see where the tension on the track, with 4,000 pounds of tension on the track, all of the bushings and all of the components within the track are extremely stressed when the tension gets to that point. Also, there's a big yellow note in the middle of the screen there. It says reduced drawbar pull as a result of extreme forces that burden the drivetrain. So when we tension the track above what the specification is, then we can have a performance effect on the machine. So track sag, having the right amount is great. Having too much or too little is bad. We'll go to the next screen here. You can see over on the right-hand side of the screen, we have a track that's too tight. And then on the left-hand side of the machine, we have a track that's too loose. And so we've talked about too tight and why that's bad, how it puts stresses on the chain, how it puts stresses on the rest of the undercarriage components. But when we go too loose, we have a lot of movement that happens that's unnecessary, that can cause extra movement within the components of the undercarriage. And anytime the undercarriage is moving, that's wear that undercarriage is seeing, and that can be dollars out of the pocket of the machine owner. So we don't want the undercarriage to move too much, and of course we don't want it too tight. The next item to discuss is packing or dirty undercarriage. On the right-hand side of the screen, you see this tractor, this D6 here, and the packing on this machine is extreme. That is beyond anything that the machine was built to handle. Now, obviously, the machines run in a lot of dirty areas, and they get full of dirt during the workday, and that kind of stuff happens, right? But you can inspect it. You can't assess the level of wear on the undercarriage if it's full of mud and dirt and debris. So we stress the importance of a clean machine, clean undercarriage. Now, during the day, while you're operating, things are going to happen. Stuff builds up, mud builds up, dirt and debris build up. But you can't do a good visual inspection with all that mud in there. That mud can add to wear of the components. So if you got a bunch of mud packed, say, around this final drive or around this carrier roller, that mud can be detrimental to the service life of that component. So taking a shovel, cleaning that out as best you can every single day, making sure that undercarriage is clean is going to extend the life of your undercarriage. Here's another example of packing on an undercarriage. Again, extreme conditions. We understand that the machines run in mud and dirt all the time, and that's okay, but we can't do that good visual inspection with all that mud and debris in there. What if there is a piece of chain or a piece of cable or maybe a big rock that's in this packing, and the machine is running and that rock is, say, rubbing on a component that's rotating? That rock could be wearing that component. Without cleaning that track out, you can't determine that. Over on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see where the packing was so bad that it actually broke the chain of the undercarriage. So the upper left-hand picture there, you can see the chain is actually broken just where the packing was so bad, and it caused so much tension on the track that it finally broke. So packing is not a good thing. Let's proceed with the visual inspection and talking about the final drive and sprocket area. So, of course, the final drive area is the part that drives the machine. Now, we're going to be showing pictures within this ShopTalk presentation, and the machine is painted bright yellow and there's no dirt or debris. And we realize that's not the situation that most machines are in. There's not fresh paint, and there's not no dirt or anything like that on machines, but we show you a clean picture. That way you can see the components that we're specifically looking for. So in this case, we've got a final drive here, and we want to check for leaks. So we're going to check for leaks in a couple of different areas. Of course, this cover right in this area, if you can see where my pointer is, there's a cover there. We want to see if that's leaking. There's individual O-rings around each one of these final drive planet gear covers. There's drain plugs and fill plugs that we want to make sure that those are not leaking. But on the back side of this sprocket, there's a seal in there, and we call that seal a duocone seal, and that's just the name of the type of seal that it is. And we want to make sure to look back there behind the sprocket and make sure that that seal is not leaking. Of course, inspect the sprockets, looking for broken or chipped teeth, sharp edges, loose or missing mounting bolts. These sprockets are put under a tremendous amount of stress, and if we have one bolt that's missing, initially you don't think, well, one bolt, we can deal with it for the day. But with that one bolt missing, now you reduced your clamping force on the sprocket segment, and the other two bolts are forced to hold that sprocket segment in place. Well, the extreme pressure that's on it can cause those two bolts to be under extreme pressure and not be able to hold that clamping force. And it can damage the flange of either the segment or the flange of the final drive assembly. And over time, it can cause a bunch of wear in this area. Now, we can fix that, of course, with our machine shop, but if there's something that a customer can do, it's to make sure that those bolts are on there and on there tight, so you don't have that damage on that flange where that sprocket segment bolts to the machine. When we're talking about rollers, in this case we're talking about carrier rollers, but when we get into rollers, we want to look for leaks and uneven wear. These rollers have oil in them, and they will leak if there's a problem with the seal or with a bearing that's causing misalignment of a seal. They can leak oil out. And they don't have a whole lot of oil in them, so when they start leaking, they don't leak for very long. We also want to look at the wear surfaces of all the rollers to make sure that those areas are wearing evenly, side to side, and even across the machine. Maybe on the other side of the machine, look at how that carrier roller is wearing compared to this carrier roller. You want to inspect the mounting bolts down here at the bottom picture. Make sure that the mounting bolts are in place. And if you see any rust around a bolt, that'll indicate that bolt is possibly loose. When we're talking about the track rollers down on the bottom of the undercarriage, they've got a couple of bolts that hold them in place too. And make sure those bolts are in place. Again, checking the surface of the roller for wear, uneven wear or odd-shaped wear. Those are important things to note. And the reason why it's so important to make sure that these bolts are tight and inspect for any loose bolts or missing hardware is because you got a shaft on this roller, and this particular shaft can, if it becomes loose, it can wear out this component that shaft seats in. That little seat there can get some wear, and then when you put a new roller in place, it's not going to seat the way it should. So we always want to check for hardware and make sure that nothing's missing when we're talking about undercarriage. And this is a large track type tractor with a Bogie setup, and these Bogie cartridge pins, the ones that you're seeing here, these things can have oil leakage on them. You got this whole assembly rotates side to side, so articulates, I guess, will be the better term. And you can have some broken parts down in here, specifically related to hardware. Here is a roller guide here, and this guide, again, something that can have broken hardware that may not initially seem like a bad thing, but it will be detrimental to the life of the undercarriage for sure. When we look at idlers, you can have the idler on the machine. Of course, we have front idlers and rear idlers on elevated sprocket machines, but front idlers and rear idlers both have oil in them, and so they can leak oil just like all the rollers can. And so there's some bearings, there's a seal there, and if you see one starting to leak some oil out, again, note that they don't have a whole lot of oil in them. And if they start leaking oil, it's not going to leak for very long, and then the dirt's going to wash it off, and it's going to look like everything's okay. In this picture on the left-hand side, if you see my indicator, my pointer here, note how we got different types of wear or different shapes of the wear pattern on this idler. So on this side, on the left-hand side of the idler, it doesn't look too bad, but on the right-hand side of this idler, it's kind of an odd shape, odd profile to that wear, and that's something that we should note and see what's going on there. There may be something in misalignment. These kind of odd wears can come from the operation of the machine too. Maybe you're operating on cross slope and it's putting more pressure on a certain side of the undercarriage. But the biggest thing is to make a note of that and look for, crazy types of wear or something that doesn't look normal. As far as track guides are concerned, the biggest thing is making sure that they're there. Oftentimes we see machines come in for undercarriage work where the track guides are missing, just completely gone. Maybe the bolts are broken off, and that's not abnormal to see guides that are bent or hardware that's broken, because if your machine is put in any kind of a bind, these guides are there to help push that chain back over to the roller. And so that guide certainly helps with that, and it can handle a lot of stress, but there's times when it can't handle as much stress as we put on them, so they'll break off. When that happens, there needs to be an effort made to find that guide if it's been lost off of the machine, but also put it back onto the machine. It'll help with undercarriage life, and it'll help with wear on other components. Now, this is to take, I don't want to misspeak and make you think that guides are necessary on every machine and every application. There are times when guides are not put onto machines because of packing or because of the application of the machine. So if your machine has guides, then make sure they're all in place. But if your machine is specifically made without guides or with less guides than normal, then that's normal, for the application. As far as the shoes are concerned, make sure that the shoes are not damaged or missing. If you have loose track bolts, that can cause an issue with the shoe on the surface of the rail itself. So we always want to check the track bolts, check the track shoes for bends or breaks or anything like that. Down at the bottom center picture, you can see where a shoe has folded underneath another shoe, likely because the bushings in this undercarriage are worn. And when something like that takes place, some type of effort needs to be taken to correct that issue. Now, sometimes we run undercarriage to the end of its life, and your pads develop some wear types on them, and that's acceptable. But just make sure that you don't have things lapped over one another, they're contacting or touching one another. We want to eliminate that as much as possible. When we're looking at the links and pins and bushings, we always want to look at the surface where the contact is made for wear. So in this case, we see the upper center picture. If you see my indicator, we've got the track link pin, and a majority of our wear is going to be over on this contact surface on the link itself. This is a picture from underneath the track assembly, and you can see the main contact surfaces are the link surface here itself, and then the center pin or bushing where the sprocket and potentially idler, depending on the design, hits the bushing or contacts the bushing. And so that's our main wear surfaces. And if you're seeing surfaces outside of that are receiving wear, you know there may be an issue. Here's a potential issue on this rail. This rail you can see has got a lot of wear on the side, so that it'll indicate that that something is going on with this undercarriage. The upper left-hand picture, where my indicator is now, you see a little bit of wear on the side, but that's normal, completely normal wear. So you're always looking for excessive noise in the track during operation, but notice down there at the in that paragraph it says touch the end of the pin with your hand or use the infrared thermometer, and if you have a temperature difference across multiple pins, that can indicate that you got a joint within the track that might be dry. So if you have a hot link pin, then you may not have any oil within that pin and bushing. As far as the roller frame is concerned, of course, keeping it clean will allow you to look for cracks or any kind of strange wear on the roller frame. Looking at each of the welds along the way will help you figure out if there's anything going on there. These roller frames a lot of times have oil in them, and if you have a crack in the roller frame, that oil will begin to leak out. So it'll tell you right away that this is something that needs to be repaired. Underneath, about in this location, you have the pivot shaft, which is the shaft that goes across the machine and allows this undercarriage to rotate. It'll rotate up and down from here. And so inside of the undercarriage, behind the roller frame, you have this pivot shaft area. And this pivot shaft also has oil in it. And there's a seal right here. And so if that pivot shaft is leaking oil, you know that you have a pivot shaft seal that is worn, and you could potentially have some problems in the long run if you don't have that repaired. On the opposite end of the roller frame, you have the equalizer bar, and this helps to spread the load across the roller frame. And for the equalizer bar, there can be oil leakage around those equalizer bar pins. They can have cracked or missing portions of the rubber equalizer pad. That's what you're seeing in this area. And loose or damaged mounting bolts. And the one that we see sometimes is the irregular shaped center pin bores. So this bore right in here and these two end bores, if this pin begins to wear out and it's not replaced in time, the hole can elongate, just like maybe a loose bolt in a piece of metal would, and it'll need to be welded and machined into the correct specification again. That happens from time to time, but with good visual inspection, you can prevent that. As far as the pivot shaft is concerned, again, checking for leaks around the pivot shaft sealing area, and checking for leaks on the outside of the frame. Lastly, you got bottom guards underneath the machine, and any oil leaks would be indicated by dirt and oil buildup underneath the surface edges of the bottom guards. So this could indicate that you might have a powertrain oil leak coming from maybe your engine or transmission. You could have a coolant leak that's coming out of your bottom guard. So those things do exist. They do happen. And checking the bottom guards for any kind of damage, any kind of bolts that are missing, any kind of cracks, just a good visual inspection at these bottom guards oftentimes can prevent a failure on the job site. So have a good look at the guards. I know it's a quick rundown. It's not very fast, didn't touch every single topic regarding undercarriage, but that's a quick run through a visual inspection. Would like to tell you about upcoming shop talks. We've got another schedule coming out for July. We haven't posted that yet, but genuine cat parts, and next Wednesday we're going to be covering batteries. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop us a line at ShopTalk channel at cartermachinery.com. Again, as always, I appreciate your time, and Carter Machinery appreciates your business. And if there's anything we can do for you, please let us know. And thank you all again for joining us.